Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us a little bit late. Lunch break a little late, or a little late lunch break. Just give it just one more moment, just to give people a few minutes, a few seconds to get on, as it's not the usual time. Hopefully tomorrow back to the normal time. Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to today's lunch break with the Rabbi. Today is December 30th, 2020, and it is the 15th day of Teves, a full moon, and we are going to continue our conversation about the final Torah reading in this week's Torah reading, Parshas Vayechi. In this final Torah reading, we know this is also the final Torah reading as we read about our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We read about Joseph of being the second in command of Egypt, and now all the Jewish people are spending time together in Egypt. Right before Jacob's passing, we are told about where Joseph brings his children Manasseh and Ephraim to get blessed by their grandfather Jacob. An interesting few tidbits here. Jacob was the first person not to feel well before his passing. I'm sure you're very familiar with the comment, when a person sneezes, you say, bless you, zu gesund. And that was before Jacob, a person would pass just by the mere sneeze. Jacob prayed to God that a person should have time to prepare his family before his passing. And therefore, Jacob was one of the first ones to fall ill before his passing. This week's Torah reading begins with that episode where Jacob falls ill. And therefore, Joseph calls his children. And then following that, Joseph and his brothers all come to get a blessing from Jacob. But what we're going to talk about today is the blessing that Jacob gives his grandchildren, Ephraim and Manasseh. And when Joseph walks into his father's room, he brings the two children that they should be blessed by their grandfather, Manasseh being the older one and Ephraim being the younger one. However, Jacob instead puts his right hand on the younger one and his left hand on the older one. And he crosses his hands. And Joseph tries to correct Jacob, saying, Dad, you got it wrong. It's really Ephraim who's the younger one, and Manasseh who's the older one, and therefore you should switch your hands. Which Jacob says, I know exactly what I'm doing, don't you worry. And he continues to bless Manasseh and Ephraim. Now, we all know that a tzaddik, a person of Jacob, he wasn't senile, he knew exactly what was going on. And why was it that Jacob insisted on blessing the younger one over the older one, even though he blessed them both, but to put his right hand predominantly on the younger one? And why was it that Yosef was protesting? Like, what's the big deal? Whose hand is on which? They're both getting a blessing. Why was it that Yaakov was so adamant that Ephraim should be on the right hand and that Joseph was adamant that Manasseh should be at the right hand? And to understand this, we need to understand and look at who Manasseh and Ephraim were, and then we can understand the relationship to Yosef and to Yaakov and why each one preferred one over the other, and it was a matter of perspective. Manasseh and Ephraim, Yosef gave them their names over his situation that he was in the land of Egypt. Joseph was currently in the land of Egypt, and when in the land of Egypt, he was then the ruler, and he had his children while he was in the land of Egypt. And he gave his son Manasseh the name Manasseh, which reminded him of his spiritual advancement that he would have aspired and wished to be at. But unfortunately, being that he was in the land of Egypt and a land of confinement, involved in materialism, he did not have the opportunity to reach that great level of spirituality. And therefore, Manasseh is symbolic of that yearning and desire for that level of spirituality that he would like to attain. Ephraim symbolizes his material success. Comes from the word kihifrani, because God made me multiply. God blessed me even in a place of difficulty. From Yosef's perspective, what was the greatest ideal? Was the spiritual ideal that unfortunately he was missing. From Yaakov's perspective, it was not necessarily the spiritual ordeal, but it's the transformation that you've given of the materialism. Yaakov looked at what Yosef accomplished. Yaakov looked at what the Jewish people accomplished where they were in the land of Egypt. That notwithstanding the challenges and the difficulties that they may have had, they still were able to overcome it and transform it and bring spirituality to that place. This is exactly the perspective that Yosef had versus Jacob. Joseph was a person of a tzaddik, of righteous, of great value, always longing to be able to be better and to be able to have that greater spiritual level of Menashe. And therefore he said the right hand should go on Menashe. While Yaakov said Yaakov is the level of emes, of truth. And therefore truth is in what has happened, what is being done. And therefore when you see an actual transformation, Ephraim, that's where Yaakov puts his emphasis and energy. These two perspectives are not just Menashe and Ephraim way back when, but they are also related to us and every single one of us in every single part of our life. We go through different challenges, we go through different obstacles, and we find our limitations of what we could and can't do. And therefore we are put to test and to challenge. How do we? What do we? And we have to remember we have to have this duality of Menashe and Ephraim. We always must strive to connect to something greater, to be something higher. But then we also have to live in the reality and transform what we are in. We are now in a time of exile. We are now in a time where godliness may not be seen so clearly. We cannot sit back and say, oh, yeah, I wish I can just be a spiritual person. But we got to work within the present Ephraim and transform the exile that we're currently in and making it a holy place. This is the task of the Jew. Ever since they've been in the first exile, Joseph being the first Jew in exile, to this very same situation to us now 3,500 years later. The question and the dilemma still is here for us to solve. To be able to live the duality of Menashe and Ephraim, continue to strive to be in a godly place, but also transform the place we're in into a godly place. Every single one of us should never give up and say, what should I do? I'll never make it to that godly, that high level where initially our soul comes from. But on the contrary, we have to ask ourselves, Ephraim, what did we do today? How have we transformed something negative into something positive? What were the thoughts that I made positive? What were the people that I encountered that were sad and I made them smile? And what were the thoughts that I may have instead of being negative, creating a more positive vibe and cheer around me? This is the question that we all have to ask ourselves. How are we a Menashe and Ephraim in every single day? All of us Jews are blessed that we should be like Menashe and Ephraim. As Jacob continues to bless his grandchildren, HaMalach HaGoy Eloisimi Kol Ra, the angel that protected you, that protected me from all bad, should protect you as well. Jacob is telling every single one of us, there's an angel watching us. There's an angel protecting us. And there's an angel guiding us and assisting us to be able to get through every single one of these challenging times. The question is only, are we embracing that angel? Are we using it to our fullest potential to be the best Menashe and Ephraim we can be? God bless you. Have a great day. Wishing you the very best. Let the angel protect you and guard you, and you will be able to convert and transform material to spiritual, evil to good, and nonsense to godliness. All the best. Wishing you a great day. Sorry for the delay. Tomorrow, God willing, we'll be back on schedule. Looking forward to joining you again tomorrow. Shalom.